All right. So this week, I am super excited to welcome to the show someone I've never actually met in person, but who on paper sounds extremely interesting. Dr. Laurence Hillman, who is a pioneer in what we call archetypal astrology, and someone whose work really sits at the intersection of psychology, leadership, astrology, and ancient wisdom, which is brilliant. He was raised in Switzerland, but now I believe divides his time between Sweden and the States. So, welcome. Do I call you Lawrence or do I call you Dr. Hillman?
Lawrence, please call me Lawrence. That's just fine. Thank you.
Okay, well, Lawrence, before we get started, can we just do a brief definition for anyone who doesn't know about it? How do you describe archetypal astrology?
Sure. So basically, the idea is that the planets represent something in us. They are different parts of us, characters within us, voices we can step into, character traits, personality traits. We use different terms for them. The archetypal astrological perspective simply adds one more, shall we say, line to that and says that these inner figures or characters are archetypal in the sense that they're universal experiences. So it doesn't matter where you go or who you talk to around the world, people will have the same inner archetypal experience of this character that they will then translate through their own culture, through their own upbringing, through their own history, their own personality into some kind of behavior. But it starts as an archetypal, meaning universal, universally understood idea, if you want. The term archetypes comes to us from Jung mostly. Plato talked about it even earlier, but Jung sort of coined the term in a more sort of publicly understood way. And it essentially says that there's a repository of these archetypal experiences that are universal, that people can understand wherever they are, however they look, or whatever their context is. And so if we have that key understanding of archetypes, then we know that we can speak to each other in a language that is commonly understood, because it doesn't matter where you go in the world, people will understand this idea of an inner warrior, or an inner lover, a nurturer, a sovereign. These kind of terms are universal. And so what we do in archetypal astrology is we take from all the archetypes that exist, and there's hundreds, thousands, maybe endless, I don't know, but we take 10 that are represented by the 10 planets, and that gives us a set of figures that can play out any play in anybody's life.
All right, so let's have a think then. So, what have we got as an archetype for? Well, let's start with the sun.
So the sun is the sovereign archetype. That's the sense of me, independent from others. I rule. I have a charismatic heart that radiates outwardly in different ways, because depending on what sign the sun is in, that's going to vary. That's going to change or transform the energy. But we can recognize the core sovereign energy in somebody, and that is the sun.
Do you normally see that as a masculine archetype, or does it
No,
depend on who you're
no.
talking to?
I sort of hesitate with these labels because they are so loaded. We could use yin and yang, which is a little bit less loaded. Yang as in the creative outpouring, and yin as in the reflective indrawing. And it is a yang planet, yes. And the moon is the parallel to the yin. But the important thing is that everybody has all the planets, and therefore everybody has an equal amount of yin and yang in them if they express it accordingly. The culture doesn't believe that, but we do.
Right. So, my next question was going to be, what about the moon?
Mhm. So the moon is the reflective, is the receiving, we call it the nurturer in the archetypes at work model, which is a model that we use in organizations where astrology is a bit too iffy still, but we use the same archetypes, we just call them something different. And so the moon is the receiving, the nurturing, the holding, emotional, and well, they're all emotional in their own ways, but the caring sort of part of us, the feeding, how we feed ourselves, how we feed others, how we nurture, basically.
Okay. So, the week this podcast goes out, we're going to actually have the full moon in the sign of Aquarius. So, we've got the sun and the moon, and we've got the sun in Leo, and we've got the moon in Aquarius. How would you look at that in terms of archetypes? And what can, someone who's interested in astrology kind of gain from looking at it like that?
So say that again. You want to know the sun in
So
Leo and the
the
moon.
week that this podcast goes live, we're going to have the
Hmm.
full moon in the sign of Aquarius.
Hmm.
So we're going to have the sun in Leo and the
Yeah.
moon in Aquarius. We're going to have
Well,
the
I find that particularly interesting because I spend a lot of time talking about the current times with leaders around the world and with clients. And, what the heck is going on? A lot of people are asking that. And to me, there's a lot of small stuff going on, transits into signs, planets changing signs and things like that. But to me, there's a much, much bigger story going on. And the whole story that can explain 99% of what's happening right now, to me, is based on the Leo-Aquarius tension of the Aquarian age. And so the key question of our time for me is to ask, you know, how does selfhood exist? That's the Leo question. How does selfhood exist in massive globalization and being part of the whole? So in the collective, how can I be a self and still be a grain of sand on a beach? Which means that I'm part of something much, much larger. That is the essential question that just about every topic that you're seeing in the news these days can be traced back to that if you look at it symbolically. And to me, so it's interesting that this podcast goes out on that date because that is actually the main topic that I will be talking about in all the lectures that I'm doing this summer, that I'm talking about in the stuff I'm teaching already at Pacifica right now. It is the key understanding of why AI is happening now. It explains just about everything. If we go into that understanding, that key foundational tension that we're just coming upon as we enter the age of Aquarius, where I have to understand how me, my ego, my solar sovereign self fits into a collective that sees me as part of it and not as an individual as much as I would like. That tension has to be held. That's a complexity capability to hold both of those at the same time. And people are struggling very hard going either to the tribal Leo thing, it's about me, or, my tribe, my little group, or it is about total, you're just a number in a system and you don't really exist outside having some kind of a generic identity as one of a mass, which is very frightening to a lot of people. So that conversation to me is that the key of our times will be for a long time, who knows how long, but certainly for a couple of hundred years. I'm guessing because it's going to take a while for us to really develop that capacity to hold that tension.
okay. So and then to really down to earth for our podcast listeners who are thinking, okay, but what about the full moon this week? What can they get using these sorts of lenses that you use?
They can sit and meditate on that question and see what kind of answers they get. I think that is the most valid question to be asking in these times. How do I fit into the collective? And if they come up with an answer, then they've made a tremendous move forward in their own development, as in how they fit into this new crazy world that nobody understands. And that is the question. So, doing it during the full moon in those signs is kind of ideal. And it's also bringing together, what I want and what I need. Sun and moon is sun says what I want. I want this. The moon says, but I need this. And so the tension between the two, and it's perfect because, the sun might be saying in the full moon, in those positions, I want to be creative. I want to be independent. I want to be me, and nobody tells me who I am. And it's all about me, sun in Leo. And the moon says, no, but I need to be part of a whole. I need to be part of the collective. I need to fit in somewhere and not live on a mountaintop by myself because those days are over, where we could do that. It's now we're all connected in ways that we never have been before. There are now global events that happen overnight, not just wars, but also COVID. These kinds of things that change everybody's life overnight are happening increasingly. And that just shows us how small the earth really is and how much we're actually interconnected. So, of course, the internet does that as well, and AI will do that even more with the hive mind notion that, there's all these amazing new ways of connecting with people. So, how do I stay an individual in that? To meditate on that question, I think would be an extraordinarily good use. In fact, I'm going to do it myself. Would be a great way to think about how to best align myself with these times. It's a window of opportunity to really sink into that question.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one thing I sort of feel like with AI and this astrology that you're talking about, the big picture and the full moon this particular week that the podcast goes out, is also, you know, with Chat GPT, for example, which I think is the AI that most people on planet Earth are currently, you know, involved with more than anything, even though there's a lot more than that going on. But you know, if you think of it like a tornado spiraling down, and it's almost like you've got Aquarius at the top with everything that man has ever put on the internet sort of being spiraled down into something that is eventually going to become quite homogenous and not very Leo. It's sort of, there's a weird thing that's happening, because if we just keep using Chat GPT and everybody's just using everybody's work, isn't it all going to lose the sense of the Leo as we move into the Aquarian age, because it's all going to be about what everybody's already said, just saying it another way. Do you know what I'm saying? Am I making any sense?
Interesting. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. This is a question I've been pondering quite a lot the last couple of months. I would just add one thing, and I would say that the creative act is still available to all of us. What is creativity in the first place is a really good question. So I've always thought of, and there's lots of versions of what something creative is. Most creative people, if you ask them, there are lots of wonderful quotes you can find. What creative people say is that you get out of the way. Or as one artist once said, you are the pipe, not the water. In other words, there's this notion that something is coming to you. You are being gifted. We talk about gifted children. You're being gifted by something that comes to you from somewhere. Where does it come from? You could define that as ever you like. I think of it in Jungian terms, that it's like a large ocean that contains all repositories of all wisdom of all times. And now and then we get glimpses into those times. Musicians say they hear a song and then they write it down. And so they're hearing it, it's coming from somewhere. So if we take that assumption for a moment, as that's what creativity is, that's a process that happens outside of ChatGPT if we choose. What we then put back into ChatGPT can be used by others because we're now adding to the collective. So the process is Leo by making my own connection. And that's something that human beings can be too lazy to do and just not do anymore and just do everything with ChatGPT. But that's the same thing as not researching the stuff that you get on Google, or not researching the stuff that someone sends to you and just accepting it and passing it on. Discernment is not one of human beings' great strength, and hasn't been, and is going to be far more necessary to make those distinctions. But it does not, I don't think ChatGPT in any way, shape, or form diminishes access to source. I call it source, where that information comes from, and that we do in a creative moment. On the contrary, my experience with ChatGPT has been that it requires me, pushes me, and challenges me to be much more creative than I am without it. So I see it as a really good tool. I see it as a chisel. A chisel doesn't make the sculpture, but without the chisel, you're not going to make a sculpture. So I think that it's actually a tremendous enhancement for creativity. And it allows me to explore and experiment with different things very, very quickly without having to spend months and months doing something, realizing it's a rabbit hole. And so I can do it in seconds, and I can tap into what other people have said. I can be lazy about it, but that's my choice. So essentially, the ethics of ChatGPT and quote unquote stealing other people's work is not that the tool itself is unethical, but it's that the person who uses it is going to define the ethics of the process. And so if I use it to write all my papers and I don't think about anything myself, I just use what others have said, that's not ethical in my mind. Now, but if I ask it some questions and say, well, somebody else said something else this way, oh, that's interesting. Well, that might change my way of thinking. Intelligence to me is defined as applying something you learned in a different place. So I learned it over in this side, but I'm not going to apply it over there in a different setting. That is intelligence to me. And so one can very intelligently use ChatGPT. And in that sense, ChatGPT is very intelligent because it is making connections that I didn't make before. So I'm learning a whole lot with ChatGPT, accelerated in ways that I wouldn't have without it. So I think it's a fantastic tool, but it's not in that sense, able to access source for something really new. And then the question is also, is there anything new under the sun? That's another question. Or is everything really just, repeated in different ways? So if you think about, Cubism, that Picasso famously sort of brought about, he had been to a museum and seen some African art. the week before he sort of made his first Cubist painting. And he combined African art sort of figure faces with two other styles of painting and made this new thing. So is that really new, or is it a new combination of things that already existed? So what is invention anyway? What is new anyway? What is creativity anyway? These are the questions that we're being forced to ask in this age of Aquarius. And Pluto is, what I say about Pluto is, pardon my French here, but bullshit doesn't survive a Pluto transit. So any bullshit around Aquarius is going to be shown. And some of it is, well, some of it is what we're seeing in politics these days. There is a truth demand by Pluto of whatever he crosses. We saw a lot of structures that were not really structures when Pluto went through Capricorn and took them down. And so now we're seeing the same thing with groups and with people and with connections. So I'm really curious how it will all shake out over the next, 20 or so years with Pluto in Aquarius. But it's just part of the bigger thing that we also have the collective moving into the age of Aquarius.
Mm. Yeah, I actually think it's funny because this is not the first time this has happened when I've been recording a podcast that's going to come out a few weeks later. It's sort of almost perfect. And, actually, yeah, this whole Leo Aquarius thing is so interesting when you think of it in terms of ChatGPT. So for people who don't know, Aquarius is the sign that rules technology and is associated in the modern traditions with the planet Uranus, which is also very tech. And Leo is, very much about creativity. And so it is interesting sort of having this conversation now at a time where we're talking about, well, there's the need for creativity even in the face of this new tech, and actually how can they actually work together, and which kind of leads me into talking about Uranus, the planet that rules Aquarius, which is the sign that modernly where the full moon is this week. We've actually got the week that this episode comes out as well, we've also got Mars trining Uranus, which is making a harmonious aspect to Uranus. And I know that Uranus is big in your work. I believe you call what we are currently living in a Uranian era. So can you explain what that means astrologically, and I guess, what it means for us in terms of global events?
Right. So to me, the key figures in the heavens are the planets, not the signs. The signs to me are backdrops against which we see the planets. So I don't really talk a lot about signs. The signs to me are the clothes that the actors are wearing. So Venus in Pisces might be wearing blue flowing dress and offer you a drink or a joint or something like that. Venus in Leo might be wearing very flashy, fashionable clothes and be, and exquisite makeup or something like that. And it's not gendered; it could be a guy or a woman in either sense, or anything in between. And and Venus in Capricorn might be wearing a business suit and have a briefcase under his or her arm, something like that. So you sort of so the signs just modify, but they're always Venus in these three examples. So Uranus to me is the actor, the part of us, the live archetype that we're dealing with in the age of Aquarius, not so much the sign of Aquarius. So to me, technology is ruled by Uranus, not by, in other words, the planet gives the sign its flavor. So the rulership of technology and science and modernity and AI and all of these things, internet connectivity, three-dimensional networks that we're all tied into, social networks, all these things are Uranian. And so we're living in a very Uranian time. And so what every person has to do, because that tension between Aquarius and Leo is really a tension within every single human being between their inner sovereign, their inner sun, and their inner renegade, the Uranian side of them. So that reconciliation has to happen personally. And if you can't reconcile those two, then you will always feel torn one or the other. And I don't fit, I don't fit in. I'm afraid of the future. I'm afraid of technology. I'm afraid of science, these kinds of things. So we have an opportunity individually to get a head start on this new age by making some kind of agreement internally, personally, with what it means to be what I call future fit. Future fit means being fit for this new future that's coming that is so upsetting to many people because it is incredibly unpredictable, it is unknown, it is strange. People try to figure it out based on the past. That doesn't work because that's your Uranian nature, is that, nothing can be known because the whole idea is that it's new and different. So we have to make this inner reconciliation. You could also use that full moon in Leo and Aquarius. You could use that time to meditate on what a reconciliation within you would look like between that part of you that is creative and puts out and is at the core and the center of your sense of I am. How does that part of you speak to that party that says, yeah, screw all of this and let's break all the rules and be different and paint our hair blue? And, I've called Uranus the third finger planet sometimes. It's that part of us that says, I'm going to do whatever I want. Don't tell me what to do. And some people have it stronger than others, but it's in everybody. That's the thing, is that in astrology, we're all actually much more the same than we're different. It's a universal language. Everyone has Uranus in their chart somewhere. Get to know that part of yourself really, really well. Get to know how to activate that part of you if it's repressed, if it's hidden, if you were told don't ever show that side of yourself, whatever the stories were, get to know that side of yourself really well and find a way to bring that part of you into this world. That's how you become future fit.
Amazing. So I think that, continuing on the idea of the Uranian era, I think a lot of people are feeling a very deep sense of instability now, which is very Uranian. We have the potential for wars, especially as we're speaking now, climate anxiety, AI, economic uncertainty, chaos. So how can archetypal astrology help us kind of, I don't know, stay grounded and maybe find our why in the midst of all this chaos? Is it literally about doing what you're saying, which is, we'll think about, the maverick in you and think about the creator in you? Is it think about the archetypes within you and just see how they play out? And would you suggest people start with their natal chart? Would you say start by looking at the transits in your chart, by looking at the transits to transits up in the skies? Where do you start, Laurence?
Great question. So I believe that we'll start with where I just said what I said before, that essentially the first step for every human being to become future fit, to become ready, to not freak out during these times, is to become comfortable with their inner Uranian nature, to get to know this part of themselves and get to know it really well. That's a natal chart understanding. And it's not as simple as saying, well, my Uranus is in the third house, therefore I write, science fiction books. It's not that simple. It is a complex understanding by a very, very skilled astrologer who can help you understand what that Uranus in your whole chart means. How is that part of you separate or different from the rest of the stage? How are you responding to it? How is this part of you alive in you today? And if it's not co-creating with the current times, then what do you need to do to activate, to change, to develop that part of yourself, which can be done. And so that's the first step. The transits will show you sort of, if Uranus goes over your ascendant, being conscious of something like that could be, or crosses a major planet or something like that in your chart, could be, meaning a personal planet, could be a a shocking awakening kind of time. So that's a timing question. The transits help you say, when do you do certain things? But in general, we already know the timing for the collective is the age of Aquarius. So that question is already answered, that this is the time where we must do that from my perspective. Transits, sure, they're useful, they're helpful for, easier times to do that. We can get a lot of understanding why a person has a midlife crisis in their mid 40s or earlier 40s. These kinds of things we can understand astrologically, but that's just temporarily. I'm looking much more philosophically. And for right now, if you want to know the best place to go and make this activation happen, look at what house your Uranus is in. Uranus in the sky is in your chart at this time. So transiting Uranus in your natal chart at this moment gives you the area of your life where it is the easiest, the most natural at this moment to activate this Uranus. But it's always about activating the Uranus. Those are just tools to make it a little easier.
Okay. You saying we're in the age of Aquarius. I'm always being asked by my readers, are we in the age of Aquarius? And I don't really know the answer to that. You seem quite sure. Is that because Pluto's in Aquarius?
No, nothing to do with that. It has to do with looking at at the signs, reading the signs. There are things that are going, and we're not wholly.
That actually makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do. We read signs. And so I know all the math about some people say it's not starting for another 500 years because of some, don't look at it like that. Astrology isn't that literal. Astrology is a symbolic language. And so we want to look at the symbols that are emerging in time. The internet is the most Aquarian thing I've ever seen yet. This interconnectivity. All the keywords that we already had for Uranus are
Yeah,
coming to life. And
maybe apart from AI.
well,
Sorry to
yeah, but that I
interrupt
said
you.
the first thing that came was the internet. That was the most dramatic thing ever. Now we have AI or hive mind or global think. These things were not really even possible before. I always talked about when Wikipedia came out, I talked about that. I've been doing this astrology work for 48 years, so I've seen, before technology existed. And when Wikipedia came out, I said, this is the first time we have a collective mind, where people anybody can add something and have an idea. Somebody filters it and checks it for, insanity and things like that. That's good. But there is this idea that we can all put something into the pot. This is a very, very Aquarian idea. That's not a Pisces idea. And so we look at the symbolism. Now, Ray Grassi, who wrote a brilliant book on the Age of Aquarius called Signs of the Times, spent about 20 years researching a lot of different events and things from this perspective. He calls it that this is he reminds us that the famous song, "This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius," speaks about the dawning. And then he says, so when is it dawn? When you see the first rays of sun over the horizon, or when the sun is fully over the horizon? It's definitely not about flipping a switch. It's not, okay, Pluto entered Aquarius, flipping a switch, now we're in Aquarius. Nothing to do with it from my perspective. I look at what's
Although,
out there.
sorry, they have kind of coincided.
Not really, because there are some Aquarian thoughts that came from communism. Everybody's the same. That's a very Aquarian idea. Even though, of course, there's hierarchies in communism, but there's ideas in socialism that are Aquarian. That definitely the Declaration of Independence, or that one man, one vote. Even though black people and people of color were not allowed to vote, and women were not allowed to vote, but still this notion that we're all that these are, the French Revolution, the discovery of Aquarius. Those are all very of discovery of Uranus. These are very, very, the beginning of flight, another Uranian word, which happened within a few years of the two revolutions in the States and in France. So these symbols that emerge to me are the beginning of the age of Aquarius. Like I said, it might take us a couple hundred years to do the whole process. If you ask me today, I think we're maybe 60% there, but that's just a guesstimate.
Well, I would
People like to have
argue.
facts and numbers, but we're talking about a symbolic language. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go
No,
ahead.
that's right. I would argue that any, things like, say, when you're talking about communism and socialism and so on, maybe they were the first rays of the dawning of the age of
Yeah,
Aquarius. But
exactly.
I think we can argue, actually, as astrologers, that while I completely agree with you saying, well, it's not about transits necessarily, it's about watching the signs. We are. That makes complete sense to me. But I would argue, yes, but also Pluto has literally spent the last few years moving into Aquarius, and here we are.
Yeah, which to me, again, the BS doesn't survive, is what I've said. So now we're talking about Aquarius on a much more rational and less idealistic and sort of like Kumbaya that was the hope, in the 60s with the song. That's kind of fallen by the wayside. Now we see the power of technology and everybody being monitored and everything being watched and scanned and checked and and being all of these fears. Look at the movies and all the science, the sci-fi movies about the Matrix is a good example about being part of it, being so involved, being so much part of a collective that you lose your individuality. There's a huge fear there, and rightfully so. So we're trying to establish this balance between what that I started out saying, between me as an individual and us as the collective. And we certainly aren't even near to finding any kind of solution on that. But we're exploring, we're experimenting, and if we're conscious of what we're experimenting with, we can have our we can have our say, which does matter. What you put into ChatGPT matters because it also influences the collective.
Yeah, no, amazing, amazing. So, Lawrence, when we go live with this, you will have just given your Astrology University lecture, Finding the Why in Chaos, Astrology for Times of Upheaval, which honestly, you couldn't have timed it better at the time of recording, because we are a few weeks ahead of ourselves here. But we've had all this drama in the happening in the world. I won't go into it. I don't want to bring it up in case hopefully by the time we go live it's all over. But let me tell you, we're recording towards the end of June. There's been lots of drama going on. We're all hoping it's all going to settle down now. But tell me about the workshop, because people will have missed the live, unfortunately, but they can get the replay. What are they going to get in the workshop?
And so I plan to speak for, I don't know yet how long. Usually I talk for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then, maybe 45 minutes or so of Q&A afterwards. But this is the topic again. This is I want to be very practical. I have 5 planets in Earth signs, and I always want to make sure that the things that I talk about are useful to people and things that they can actually apply, and not just theories about astrology that are cool ideas but that aren't really useful, because people are really hurting right now. I have a very full practice of people suffering. And so, we need to give, as people in the helping professions, we need to give practical solutions to people. Here's what you can do with your particular signature in your chart at this time to become more future fit.
And is that what
That,
they're going to hear in your lecture?
yeah, practical things to do, and practical activation techniques. How do I activate my Uranus? How do I recognize it first? How do I stop pushing back at it? How do I listen to the voices of what has been told to me of what I should and shouldn't do about Uranus, and so forth? So, it's an incredibly needed archetype at this time, because we need innovation like never before if you want to solve some of these problems you just mentioned. And ChatGPT is coming just in the nick of time to tie, many animals, for instance, bees, an individual bee isn't very super smart, but the hive is incredibly smart. And so, fish, schools of fish are very intelligent together. Flocks of birds are very intelligent together. Why do human beings not do that until now? Now we do, where we think collectively. But that's the Leo pushing back. Wait a bit, what about me? How do I not just get lost in the collective? I want to be special. I want people to notice me. That's the Leo drive that says, no, I don't want to be part of a collective where I am lost in the shuffle. Huge fear of that. Uniformity, which is one of Aquarian words, the Saturn part of Aquarius. So there is this tension, and we have to reconcile that within ourselves, or we'll never solve it within the collective.
Yeah, so true. So, in a world on the edge of so much change, what do you think is the most important inner shift that we need to each make to meet the moment? What would you say?
Is that we need to get beyond thinking either or. That's the most important, the most difficult thing. And astrology is a fantastic tool for that, which is, I think, why astrology is so popular these days, because people are recognizing that simple labels on things, that I'm a this, simple typologies, I'm an Aries or I'm a Libra, therefore I'm different from you, is just too simplistic and doesn't work anymore. I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert. These things that's not enough. You cannot label people with those things. I'm an Enneagram number 3. It's just too simple. So we need more complexity. Complexity capability is a right brain capability that it takes imagination. It takes dreaming. It takes these kinds of things that we can't measure and put into a box. And astrology is a language that speaks right brain very, very well, because we need our imagination to put together all these complexities of these different figures within us. And so I think the biggest shift for each person is to know that you're not either this or you're that, but you're both things at the same time. And to hold the tension of opposites, as Jung called it, is an incredibly difficult thing to do, and is incredibly important. And if you can say, because we're all in this either or, you're with me or you're against me. Think of the political spectrum. It's very simple, that, I know immediately if I hate you or if I love you. It's that simple. It doesn't work that way because, as the Rolling Stones song went, the criminal and what does it go? Something like the criminal and the cop, they both have the same mind or something like that. The two extremes have the same, that if you go walk two extremes, it's like that snake that eats itself. The two extremes on the circle end up meeting. And so we need to recognize we all have all archetypes in us, and we need to be able to handle these different stories that are going on in people. It can be great suffering or it can be great creativity. If you have the sun in the 12th house, in Cancer and Leo rising, it can be incredibly difficult because you're always trying to be really hi everybody, and then it's almost like you come out on stage and say, hello everybody, I'm this very, very private person. That can be real suffering. That's a simple example. And so, how do you reconcile those things? If you don't, you're running back and forth, and you suffer tremendously. There's a lecture I did at Astrology University that's available there, as a recording called How to Understand a Chart in 3 minutes. It's not how to read a chart, but how to understand a chart. And that's where I talk extensively about how to reconcile the key sort of tension that's in every chart or in most charts that I've ever seen. And so how to put that into story, because we carry these tensions and we say, hi everybody, I'm this private person. That's painful. I've said that to people. This is what I see when I look at your chart, and they've burst out crying because they've felt that all of their lives in tremendous pain and suffering because they always feel like, why is everyone looking at me, or why is no one looking at me at the same moment? And that's painful. We have to learn as human beings. This is the learning of the complex times that we live in, is to be able to hold opposites that don't make sense. The Leo-Aquarius is the big one for the collective to learn how to hold.
Yeah, yeah. And, I just can't help but thinking, it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because we're saying, okay, we don't want to live in an either or world. And yet here we are saying, okay, well, actually, it's clear that we are in or moving into the age of Aquarius. We've agreed that a lot of that is to do with the tech that we're experiencing now. What is tech driven by? Binary code, on, off, either or, one or zero. So maybe the challenge is to find the spaces between the one and the zero and the on and the off and the either or. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I get your thinking. I'm not quite sure I agree, follow it completely. I get what you're saying. But the point is that what would it be? So yes, in physics, there's either or. The electricity is either on or it's off. That's how a computer works. So we could essentially say, what if we as human beings had the capacity to hold both the on state and the off state at the same time? That is what makes us human. Maybe that's the ability that we have that other creatures or that non-live things don't have, is to be able to hold that at the same time. And so we absolutely can. And, the wisest people throughout history have been able to do that. They have not seen the other as an other. They have seen the other as part of themselves, and have recognized that all that stuff is projection, and that stuff that I don't like to see about myself, so I put it out there to someone else. So yes, but that capacity is being offered to us greater than ever in this age of Aquarius and so forth. And by the way, it's not like we're no longer in the age of Pisces. First of all, there's still a lot that's going on that's very Piscean. All the religious wars, all of that stuff belongs to Pisces. Belief versus science, all those conversations belong to Pisces. But also, we don't just leave that stuff behind. There's still a lot of Aries stuff in the culture. Still a lot of Taurus stuff in the culture. And so meaning different eras, different 2,000-year periods throughout history. So that stays in the human sort of genetic material, all of that learning and wisdom and also all the problems. We just carry it with us. But the point is, there is something new. We are entering a new era, and that is significant for the advancement of human beings and for the survival of human beings. So I think we embrace it fully, and we figure out what the best way is to live in this new world by activating those parts of us that love this new world, that love chaos, that love change, that love technology, that love science, that love, being part of something where we just need to be a part of it and not own it. And these are really critical questions. And I think if we do that, we have tremendous hope as human beings to do really well over the next 2,000 years or so.
Yeah, amazing. I wonder where we'll go with all this. It's definitely going to change us, that's for sure.
Hmm.
Right. Well, Dr. Laurence Hillman, thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you online if they want to know more and what you offer.
Easiest and to know about all these different teachings and things is to go to laurence.hillman.com, just the way my name is. No space, no period in between, laurence.hillman.com. And at the top of the homepage, there is a button or just a text that says, click here or tap here if you want to study with me. And then that'll have all the teaching opportunities that are there. I have a store in my website where you can buy old recordings of things that I've done in the past. Astrology University has many of them. I'm linking them there. And lots of other places. Pacifica, Cosmos Institute is a new place I'm teaching. I taught the first course I've ever taught on introductory astrology for beginners, and that was a huge success last fall. That is available now as a course. Cosmos Institute has that. So plenty of places, lots of interviews I've done, there's a media page there that has a lot of different things. So it's easy to get a hold of me. Just go to my website. And if you have any questions, shoot me an email.
Okay. And I always like to ask people at the very end of the interview, once we've heard all their brilliant thoughts, what star sign are you?
I have Sun, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn, and Ascendant all in Capricorn.
Okay, amazing. And are you related to James Hillman?
Yes, that is my father.
Oh, wow.
Was my father, yes.
Author of an amazing book, which I think many of us read. I certainly did. The Soul Code, right?
The Soul's Code, yeah.
Soul's
He
Code,
wrote
yeah.
about 30 books, but that's the most famous one, yeah.
Oh, 30 books he wrote. Wow. Okay. Amazing.
Yes,
And
he
did
was
he
the
have a
leading thinker.
series everywhere?
He was the founding voice. My father, James Hillman, was the founding voice of archetypal psychology. And so this whole archetypes thing for me is very natural because someone once said I was marinated in archetypes all my life. And so this whole sense of an archetypal viewpoint and applying it to astrology is quite natural to me. But the basis is archetypal psychology, meaning that we have this inner multiplicity, there's richness, these stories, these myths that are universal.
Amazing. All right. Well, look, so great to talk to you, Laurence. And for people in London, Laurence will be coming here in August, end of August, and doing some workshops in London as well. So if you want to see him live, just go to his website and I'm sure you'll find all the details there. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care.